The US peace plan is on the verge of collapse. Trump, furious, threatens Zelensky and calls European leaders weaklings. The Ukrainian armed forces have destroyed the port of Temryuk. The terminal for liquefied gas transportation has been destroyed. Putin is preparing a new wave of mobilization, an emergency call-up of reservists in Russia. A state of emergency has been declared in Lithuania due to a crisis with smuggled balloons from Belarus. Putin has decided to give part of the Kherson region to Lukashenko, supposedly for the construction of sanatoriums. A historic decision, the EU is transferring 100 billion in frozen Russian assets to Ukraine. Putin's press secretary Dmitry Peskov has made billions from the war. A sensational investigation. Hello, my name is Anastasia Dmitrovskaya. Right now I'll tell you about the main stories. But first, please like this video and subscribe to our channel so we don't lose each other on YouTube. After all, there are 20 points. President Volodymyr Zelensky commented on the peace plan revised by the Ukrainian delegation.
Various plans. Although the basis is the same, there were 28 points. Now there are 20. This has leveled out this direction. And the frankly non-Ukrainian points have been removed. The Americans are inclined to seek compromise.
One of the difficult issues is territory. According to Zelensky, no compromise has been reached here yet. But at the same time, partners propose exchanging part of the temporarily occupied Donetsk region and Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant for territories Russia has not yet captured. It is not specified who this idea comes from. But one thing is clear. The territory of Ukraine is not up for negotiation. And because of the principled stance of Ukraine and President Zelensky on this issue, as reported by the publication Telegraph, Trump's peace plan is on the verge of collapse.
Zelensky's refusal to concede Donbas is unlikely to be accepted by Moscow, which casts doubt on the success of Trump's plan. The US permanent representative to NATO also stated that Trump may abandon attempts to end the war if a peaceful solution proves unattainable.
At the same time, as Axios reports, the US is increasing pressure on Zelensky to get him to agree to territorial concessions. One way or another, efforts to move toward peace continue. During his European tour, Zelensky is trying to build a common position and plan with Europe. And it seems they've managed to make some progress. And the German newspaper Bild reports that today the US will receive the Ukrainian version of the peace plan. Meanwhile, Trump is openly expressing his outrage at the joint efforts of Ukraine and Europe and is reposting an article with a very telling headline. Impotent Europeans can only get angry when Trump rightfully excludes them from participating in the Ukraine agreement. It is already clear that reaching an agreement is not working out. And whether it will work out remains an open question. Since we want to preserve Ukraine, Trump wants a peace agreement in any form, and Russia wants Ukraine's capitulation, and the Kremlin is certainly not averse to fighting. The only thing is, they have less and less time and money. Bild believes that Putin will have the strength to fight for a maximum of 18 months. Now the question is, can we withstand Russia for those 18 months? Russia is currently in a better negotiating position, while Ukraine is losing due to Russia's size and resource advantage. In fact, Donald Trump spoke with the politicians, so next we'll talk about the statements of the American president. Russia is in a stronger position. Ukraine is losing because of the size and resource advantage of the Russian Federation. Ukraine has lost a lot of territory, and that can't be called a victory. As has become almost traditional, there was a statement that the war would never have started if Trump had been president. Trump also stated that if Ukraine rejects the plan, the US will not support Kyiv indefinitely.
If Ukraine rejects the plan, the US will not support Kyiv forever. Zelensky has to accept it because Ukraine will lose.
He also called Europe a once great deteriorating community led by weak, ineffective political leaders.
The EU is a crumbling community led by weak political leaders. I believe they are weak, and on top of that, they strive to be politically correct. I think they simply don't know what to do. Europe doesn't know what to do.
In addition, there was a statement that even before the war in Ukraine, everyone knew that Ukraine would not join NATO.
That was always the case, long before Putin. It was understood that Ukraine would not join NATO. That was long before Putin, to be honest. And now they insist.
Among other things, there was a statement that it is time for Ukraine to hold presidential elections.
Things aren't going very well. I think now is the perfect time to hold elections. They're using the war as an excuse not to hold elections. But I think the Ukrainian people should have that choice. And maybe Zelensky will win. I don't know who will win, but they haven't had elections in a long time. You know, they talk about democracy, but at some point, it's no longer democracy.
Among other things, Trump stated that Crimea is surrounded by ocean on all four sides.
It's surrounded by ocean on all four sides. Crimea is huge, but it's connected to that part of Ukraine we're talking about now, right? By a small, narrow isthmus. That's 4 sides of ocean in the warmest part. The weather there is the best of all. But Obama gave it away.
Do you believe in Trump's ability to end the war? Reading the comments under previous episodes, I see that many of our viewers are from Kazakhstan, Moldova, Europe, and even the States. We Ukrainians are very grateful to you for your support and proud that we have such a reasonable audience. Also, write in the comments under this episode which country you're watching us from and whether your country supports our fight against the Empire of Evil. I always enjoy reading your comments. We're continuing for now, and the most interesting part is still ahead. And now to the news from the front. On one of the hottest sectors of the front, our defense forces have left some positions near Pokrovsk and Miranohorod.
By decision of the command, units of the defense forces carried out an organized maneuver in the area of the settlements of Lysivka and Suky Yar. The personnel were relocated to more advantageous positions.
By executing this maneuver, the units avoided encirclement.
Ukrainian units carried out a maneuver in the area of Lysivka and Suky Yar. The units moved to more advantageous positions to prevent potential encirclement and to straighten the front line. This operation took place some time ago and was prepared in advance.
At the same time, according to Deep State, a gray zone ring has formed around Myrnorad. Military personnel are also writing about the difficult situation in the city. Muchnoy says that it is no longer about defense, but about survival.
Right now, the enemy is tightening the noose from all flanks around Myrnorad. They are acting brazenly, methodically, without stopping. The front in the city no longer looks like a line. It's a labyrinth where every move could be your last. Our fighters are holding on through sheer stubborn will, a cool head, and pure luck. In this area, all that's left is to stand firm and wait for a chance to turn the tide of battle.
Deep State analysts are also reporting on the partial control of Siversk by Russian forces.
The enemy continues to pull their infantry into the city. And right now, the situation is unfolding in a less than favorable way. After all, Siversk is gradually falling into enemy hands. Recently, there have been many sightings of infantry, but at the same time, defense forces pilots are actively striking them. The enemy has also started planting flags to prematurely demonstrate control over the entire city for their propaganda. However, they have not fully achieved this yet. According to preliminary data, half of the settlement is under enemy control.
The Russians are also pressing in the Dnipropetrovsk region. The same Muchnoy reports that units from the Rubicon Center have been brought into this direction and they have been tasked with disabling our energy infrastructure.
Russian forces are now targeting gas distribution stations, transformer substations, and specific elements of critical logistics. They are operating systematically using FPV VT-40 drones, and for targeting adjustments they employ reconnaissance wings to ensure each strike is as precise as possible. The picture is clear. The enemy is not attacking along the front line, but rather targeting vital nodes, trying to knock out the pillars of our stability. With this approach, the enemy is trying to achieve several objectives at once, creating chaos in transportation and supply, preparing for further actions in the area, and exerting psychological pressure.
But our defense forces are not only holding the enemy back in the area, they are also hitting back hard.
Our fighters continue to put pressure on the enemy with sudden moves that they can't understand or counter in time. After the capture of Tikhove, it has been confirmed that our units additionally drove the enemy out from a farmstead southeast of the settlement of Kolomyetsi. This is a small but tactically advantageous location. The line is being straightened, and the enemy suffers yet another loss in their strong points.
In addition, in the Alexandrovsk direction, 2 of our Cossacks managed to capture 6 Russian soldiers. I never cease to admire the courage and heroism of Ukrainian soldiers. They hold the front and stand against a huge horde that vastly outnumbers them. That's why I urge you to support the armed forces of Ukraine, and if you can't do so financially, write them words of encouragement in the comments. One of the Kremlin's main Z military correspondents stated that the army still can't provide soldiers with underwear and socks. Telling, isn't it? But as you can imagine, that's far from all the bad news for the enemy. More details about what's happening on the front line are coming up in our review.
Drones in Russia's Engels. There are an airfield and an oil depot belonging to the occupiers there. Drones also reached Volgograd, where they sparked a strong reaction among local residents.
What are you doing?
Over 30.
There are victims here. What's the problem?
The occupiers near the Belgorod border aren't sleeping peacefully. And while Ukrainians are attacking Russian military targets, the latter, in turn, continue to shell peaceful residents of Ukraine. This video shows the aftermath of the nighttime attack on Chernihiv, Ukraine. Russian forces attacked Okturka in the Sumy region. Hits were recorded on the roof and wall of an apartment in a 9-story building. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump, who has taken it upon himself to broker peace between Russia and Ukraine, claims that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is allegedly not ready to accept the so-called peace plan, if it can even be called that.
According to US legislation adopted back in 2017 during Trump's presidency and signed by Trump himself, the United States will not recognize any territories that Russia has annexed from Ukraine since 2014, since once again there is a corresponding law in place. So if you want to do what's outlined in this plan, to recognize these territories as Russian, you first need to change your own domestic legislation. Your own law prohibits you from doing this. So here as well, not only is the proposal's initiator external and without the expertise of the State Department and Congress, it's illegal, but even the proposals within these points themselves also contradict US law.
There's a clear example of how Trump is able to negotiate. After the conflict was resolved by the US president, clashes broke out on the border between Thailand and Cambodia. Numerous murders, rapes, and other crimes in the African country of Mali are being committed by militants of the African Corps, which is subordinate to the Russian Ministry of Defense and has replaced Wagner. Accordingly, knowing the treachery of the Russians, no one can guarantee that Ukraine will be protected from a repeat of the conflict.
No other security guarantee more effective than strengthening Ukraine's defense forces can be given to us by anyone. So the only thing we can do specifically in the context of security guarantees is to strengthen our army, not reduce it. But when it comes to peace, we see that there are those who want to reduce the Ukrainian army.
The son and namesake of the American president, Donald Trump Jr., does not rule out that his father may distance himself from Russia's war against Ukraine if attempts to achieve peace prove unsuccessful.
Russia supports talks about peace for only one reason: to persuade the US to stop further assistance to Ukraine, or at least to minimize it. Because the war that Russia could have, as it says, as was expected in Russia first and foremost, but also in the West, to win in, say, 4 days, to capture Kyiv and all of Ukraine in 2 months, has now been going on for almost 4 years. And to say that Russia is achieving success would be far, far too optimistic for Russia.
The so-called conquerors are going into Ukraine barefoot and in rags, and they're the ones saying this themselves.
3.5 years of war. Can we really not centrally supply our army with underwear and socks?
Apparently, the Russian command simply doesn't see the point in spending money on their soldiers, who are eliminated almost instantly. And to cover up the losses, the dead are listed as deserters. Partisans are the ones reporting this. Despite the problems in Vovchansk, Siversk, Mirnohrad, and Pokrovsk caused by the intense pressure from Russian forces, Donbas is holding on, according to Ukrainian war correspondents. Kupiansk is being shelled, but it still stands. Here, the Russian army is also taking a beating from the Ukrainian armed forces.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
Drones from the Security Service of Ukraine disabled the liquefied gas terminal at the Russian port of Temryuk. As is known, the port is located in the Krasnodar region and belongs to the company Maktorneft. After the strike on December 5th, a massive fire broke out there, lasting for 3 days. More than 20 storage tanks were destroyed by fire. It is also known that railroad tank cars were destroyed in the port, and the terminal, which is capable of handling up to 400,000 tons of gas per year, has been effectively shut down as a result of the attack. Lithuania has declared a state of emergency for at least a month due to smuggled balloons coming from Belarus.
In its address to the government, the Ministry of Internal Affairs explains that the ongoing launch of balloons carrying contraband during hybrid attacks carried out by Belarus poses a threat to Lithuania's civil aviation and disrupts operations at Vilnius airport. As a result, the ministry notes, the ability to transport passengers and cargo by air is lost, significant financial losses occur, and reputational damage is inflicted.
It is also known that the introduction of a state of emergency will not cause inconvenience to the population, and the issue of lifting or extending the state of emergency will be reviewed in a month. A decision on unblocking frozen Russian assets will be announced in the coming days. The Times reports this, citing sources in the British government.
The publication's interlocutors believe that the deal is very close. As the Times indicated, the agreement will provide for allocating £100 billion to Ukraine. This is about 115 billion euros using the frozen assets of the aggressor country. In particular, the United Kingdom will transfer Russian assets equivalent to £8 billion sterling. These funds will be used to provide military aid to Ukraine, or for its reconstruction in the event a peace agreement is reached, the media emphasized.
The fact that the issue of financing Ukraine will be resolved was also stated by the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky.
I don't know whether it will be a reparations loan or some alternative. The leaders promised me they understand that Ukraine cannot manage without this money. And as for the source of this money, that's a question for Europe.
However, Politico reports that Japan has refused to join the EU's plan to use frozen Russian assets to finance Ukraine. As journalists write, this has dashed the EU's hopes of securing global support for this initiative.
Japan has made it clear that it cannot use the frozen Russian assets on its territory, worth about $30 billion, to provide a loan to Ukraine, two EU diplomats familiar with the negotiations told Politico. The European Commission wants the capitals of EU countries to reach an agreement on using sanctioned funds amounting to up to 210 billion euros before the leaders' summit on December 18th. However, Belgium is resisting this due to concerns that it would have to return the entire amount if Russia gets its money back.
Previously, as a reminder, Bloomberg reported that the United States urged Europe to block the allocation of a reparations loan to Ukraine from Russian assets.
According to well-informed diplomats who spoke strictly on condition of anonymity, US government officials explicitly told member states that these crucial assets are absolutely needed to help facilitate a comprehensive peace agreement between Kyiv and Moscow and should not, under any circumstances, be used to continue the ongoing war.
But after the meeting between Zelensky, Merz and Starmer in London, it seems that the deadlock over the frozen Russian assets has finally started to break. It was right after this meeting that an article appeared in the Times in which journalists say that a decision regarding the assets has already been made, and it will be announced in the coming days. Putin has signed a decree calling up Russians who are in the reserves for military training next year.
The government of the Russian Federation and the executive bodies of the constituent entities of the Russian Federation are to ensure the implementation of measures related to the conscription of Russian citizens in the reserves for military training, and with the conduct of these training sessions.
It is important to note that such military training sessions are held annually in Russia after the publication of Putin's decree. It is also known that 2 points of this decree by Putin were withheld from publication. Meanwhile, at the beginning of November, let me remind you, Putin signed laws that effectively provide for a continuous draft and the mobilization of reservists to protect critically important facilities. Russia is planning to give part of the temporarily occupied Kherson region to Belarus for the construction of sanatoriums and recreation bases. Resorts. This was reported by the Center for National Resistance.
The head of the Kherson region, Vladimir Saldo, announced his readiness to provide Belarus with a section of the Azov Black Sea coast, allegedly for the construction of sanatoriums and holiday homes, calling this territory an ideal place for the development of resort infrastructure. According to him, the parties have already discussed the transfer of sections of the coastline. In fact, this is a direct declaration of intent to dispose of Ukrainian lands and involve a third country in their control.
Sources from the Center for National Resistance also report that negotiations on the transfer of Ukrainian territories with Belarusian entities have been ongoing since at least the summer of 2024.
At closed meetings, specific areas between Henichesk and the Arabat Spit were discussed as potential territories for long-term use. In a close circle, Saldo refers to this as an exchange of Minsk's political loyalty, allowing Moscow to legitimize the presence of Belarusian entities. CNR analysts emphasize that the resort zones are merely a cover. In reality, these territories will be used as dual-purpose facilities. Logistics centers, restricted access sites, and areas for deploying Russian and Belarusian security forces.
And what about you? Do you believe in such a scenario?
The Kremlin threatens to assemble combat drones together with India and immediately use them to strike Ukraine. In exchange for cooperating with the bunker dweller, Moscow is offering a generous bonus, the transfer of technology and combat experience. A delegation from the Smolensk FPV drone piloting center even flew to India together with Putin to set up production. For more details on the prospects of cooperation between the Kremlin and New Delhi, watch our report.
Good afternoon.
The Russian Federation is becoming increasingly dependent on India. Modi and Putin have decided to go into business together. I know
that in India they often say, we will always go together, we will truly grow together.
Russia is actively expanding cooperation and seeking to establish joint production of drones. This is stated in a new report by the American Institute for the Study of War.
The Kremlin is considering expanding joint weapons production in India to include drones, which Russia will very likely use on the battlefield. In Ukraine, possibly in exchange for Russian technological innovations and lessons learned in Ukraine.
This was confirmed by Sergei Chemezov, head of the Russian state corporation Rostec.
We have made proposals and sent them over. Regarding the Su-57, Russia is ready to offer localization of production. They said, we'll think about it.
Moscow is negotiating with Delhi about localizing the production of Russian drones, including strike Lancets, on Indian territory.
Guys, let's just not talk about this now.
The day before, in an interview with India Today, Putin emphasized that Russia is closely cooperating with India. It not only supplies weapons to the east, but also transfers technologies for the shipbuilding, missile, and aviation industries. According to analysts at the Institute for the Study of War, such statements indicate the Kremlin's intention to deepen military technical cooperation with India, possibly even up to joint production of strike drones. Thanks to its ally, the Kremlin is likely counting on using these drones in the war against Ukraine in exchange for transferring new technologies and combat experience to India. And
I want it to be clear, the Russian delegation did not come just to talk about the issue of energy, not just to place orders and sign contracts for the mere supply of oil or gas. We genuinely want to develop comprehensive, multifaceted relations with the great nation of India.
the visit of the delegation from the Smolensk FPV drone piloting center to India put all the dots on the I's. It was announced as fulfilling tasks within the framework of the Russian-Indian strategic partnership.
We greatly value India's position on many issues. India is the only country with which, by the way, we have never been at war, and with which we have no mutual claims. And we are truly grateful to the Indian side for always promptly responding to our sincere invitations, diligently coming to our joint exercises, and graciously inviting us in return, which we deeply appreciate.
At the same time, Russia is trying to attract as much Indian labor as possible into the country. Deputy Prime Minister Denis Manturov stated that Moscow is ready to accept an unlimited number of migrants from India. As it turned out, because Putin sent a significant portion of the population to war, now Russian industry is short 1.5 million people in trade, construction, and the service sector. Manufacturing
industry needs, in addition to the existing workforce, at least a minimum number of new workers. You sit there like a regular person. And what about, for example, trade? You write, an order has fallen apart, and besides that, people, everything is a mess. Construction too. I think here we will have no limits. Are we definitely workers, you and I?
In addition, the Kremlin-appointed official, the head of the occupation administration of the Kherson region, Seldo, stated that he too had discussed opportunities for cooperation with Indian representatives.
Business people from India, Iran, Nicaragua and France have shown interest. This is a sign of trust in our land, in its future, and in the determination of the people to build a new, prosperous Kherson region.
Cooperation with Russia is already causing India significant economic losses. Due to purchases of Russian oil and weapons, the US in 2025 raised tariffs on most Indian goods to 50%, including additional duties related to energy trade. This has hit Indian manufacturers focused on the American market. And after the latest meeting between Modi and Putin, the Indian rupee fell to a record low.
They say that in the past a yogi could go a year without putting anything in his mouth. But now they're breaking records. Everyone's eating.
India is wary of sanctions, so it intends to reduce imports of Russian oil to their lowest level in 3 years. The largest Indian energy company has already completely stopped purchases, switching to raw materials from Middle Eastern countries and the US.
This is an important event because you and I have known each other for 25 years.
The media reported that during Putin's visit to Delhi, he planned to discuss the purchase of Russian fighter jets and air defense systems. India has also agreed to lease a Russian nuclear attack submarine for 10 years at a cost of $2 billion. while Russians are being told to tighten their belts and about the benefits of sanctions, in the family of the Kremlin's chief spokesperson, those belts haven't fit for a long time. Billions in bank accounts, private jets, diamond watches, luxury real estate. How exactly do Dmitry Peskov and his wife profit from the war with Ukraine, from lies, and from their closeness to Putin? More on this in our report.
Dedicated to fans of propaganda. Starting January 1st, 2026, Russians will face major financial problems. Putin has gotten so carried away with the war that he's decided to pour even more money into it. But not his own money, state funds.
Vladimir Putin has signed a law raising VAT to 22%.
Electronics, appliances, groceries, utilities, and life in general will become even more expensive. According to Rosstat, about 11 million people in Russia live below the poverty line. 8% of people can't even meet their basic needs, let alone afford any luxuries. And these are only the figures that can be shown publicly. But at the same time, the number of people in Russia who are beyond wealthy is growing. And these are Kremlin people. One of them is Dmitry Peskov.
We selected him, the esteemed president. We chose him personally. Let's not interfere in his affairs. Let's allow the president to choose those whom he deems necessary.
The Kremlin's mouthpiece and a man with no comment. During the war, Putin got rich like no one else because propaganda in Russia is a profitable business. So Peskov added to his own wealth as well. Multi-billion ruble real estate, a system of constant bribes, state support, a collection of luxury watches worth a total of 25 million rubles, large savings in banks, and a carefree old age for his children. Journalists from the Mo Explainer project have assessed the scale of luxury in which the Kremlin's chief spokesperson now lives.
There sits Peskov right across from me, my press secretary. Sometimes he spouts such nonsense. I watch him on TV myself and think, what is he talking about? Who told him to say that?
For example, the nonsense Peskov spouts has earned him an apartment in Sochi in the Ideal House residential complex. 112 square meters. By the way, it's not far from Putin's residence. The residential complex is a gated, guarded area with a heated pool, gym, and a hypermarket. Inside, there are panoramic elevators, and there are only 2 or 3 apartments per floor. There's a national park nearby, but the main feature, of course, is the view of the Black Sea. All this for just about 60 million rubles. There's also an apartment in the center of Moscow, 113 square meters. As soon as Putin launched the full-scale war in Ukraine, the propagandist bought himself another apartment in Moscow City exactly 2 months later. 90 square meters, about 70 million rubles. But if you thought that was the end of the real estate list, it's not. A house in Rublevka, several apartments in his wife's name, apartments for the children, and all because Putin really needs his own personal propagandist in the form of the loyal Peskov.
In general, what they are currently doing now is especially and profoundly disgusting, truly vile, and apparently it should be paid even more significantly for indeed. Because today, loyalty in the Kremlin is bought in 2 ways: through fear and through money. The old carrot and stick method. That's why betraying Putin is dangerous for your life. You can lose your life pretty quickly or end up in prison. But on the other hand, loyal service is rewarded with money. This is exactly what binds the current inhabitants of the Kremlin together.
Peskov, thanks to his loyalty to Putin, has received and continues to receive all the benefits. However, the sanctions have made some adjustments. Before the war, Peskov was very fond of Europe, despite the fact that in Russia, people are used to calling it decaying. But now Peskov is under sanctions, and instead of Italy and France, which he loved very much, he now prefers the Maldives, the Emirates, and Turkey. But he doesn't just work for himself. Government contracts for his beloved wife are also present. On October 3rd, 2025, school children all over the country, during an important conversation lesson, they were given cards called Pride of Russia with an assignment inside to match a person to their achievements. The first one there is Tatiana Navka, a figure skater who of course has all sorts of prizes in ice dancing. But after marrying Peskov, she became better known as the wife of a multimillionaire.
It's just that we're lucky that we're both busy people. I have my own beloved profession, which is my life. I have children, a family, a home. Dmitry Sergeyevich also loves his profession. He swims in it like a fish in water.
If we were to count all her real estate, we wouldn't have enough time until the end of the broadcast. She prefers to travel between her apartments and houses in a Mercedes, with the license plate 001, and it's even from the 77th Special Series. That includes the Kremlin and the Federal Protective Service. As journalists have found out, as of the beginning of 2025, Navka has 2.4 billion rubles on deposit at VTB Bank alone. Just the annual interest from all her investments brings in about 340 million, and that's not counting salaries, fees, and Kremlin grants. Yes, despite conflicts of interest, she receives money from the state. Almost 80 million rubles just in 2025 alone.
Why not? It's nothing, my God. What's the big deal? This is just the beginning, you know?
Not only the wife, but Peskov's children are golden too. Peskov's eldest son, Nikolai, as Navalny's journalists found out, wasn't hiding it back in 2017. A love for expensive parties. He also owns real estate, luxury cars, and has over 100 unpaid traffic fines. He likes to speed too. Interestingly, at that time, Nikolai was living in Britain under the surname Choles and was convicted there for assault, spending more than a year in an English prison. After the start of the full-scale war in Ukraine, Peskov's son returned to his homeland. Already in 2023, Nikolai Peskov got a job at the Roscongress Foundation. This foundation organizes the very same St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. Just for working there, he earns between 100,000 and 200,000 rubles a month. Peskov's youngest son, Mikhail, spent his entire childhood in France, and in Russia he enrolled at MGIMO. After the sanctions, he swapped Paris and other EU cities for Turkey and the Emirates. And 27-year-old Liza Peskova already has her own business. She also lived for many years between two countries, Russia and France. But after the sanctions, she also changed her travel routes. Despite the war, Liza continued to earn money in Russia. Her share in the advertising agency Centru, which also relies on government contracts, became a gold mine. And all this wealth is only thanks to the fact that Dmitry Peskov continues to obey Putin and play along with Kremlin propaganda. Billions in income, carefree lives, and elite daily routines. Ordinary Russians will never get to see any of this because Putin continues to destroy the economy.
Hello there, Vladimir. Vladimirovich, assent from the right. Correct! Correct!
Correct. And this Kremlin policy has literally trapped everyone who isn't among Putin's inner circle.
Everyone sees everything perfectly well. Everyone understands everything perfectly well. But we also need to understand another thing. Today, protesting in Russia is mortally dangerous. Today in Russia, the prison sentences are absolutely insane. I don't even know anymore. With the sentences being handed down today, they're longer than they were in Stalin's times. They don't execute people yet, that's true, but Russia has a moratorium on the death penalty. But as for the sentences, they're already longer than they were in Stalin's times. That's why protesting is mortally dangerous. For every person, and everyone understands this perfectly well. There are a lot of people in Russia who disagree with what's happening. The other thing is, it's still unclear how this protest against the eternal dictator could actually be effective. But as soon as such an opportunity arises, I assure you, everyone will be very surprised by the number of protesters we will see.
But for now, there is no such opportunity. All the people's money is going to the war, which has already destroyed most of Russia's population. According to Russian opposition media, more than 150,000 people have already died in Ukraine. The highest number of casualties is from Bashkortostan. Being against means prison. Being for means being left with nothing. A choice without a choice. And while in Russia, those living below the poverty line are being forced to give birth, Peskov's children continue to increase their wealth. So much for the great superpower.
The International Court of Justice has accepted Russia's counterclaim against Ukraine in the genocide case for consideration. It is also known that the court rejected Ukraine's motion to dismiss Russia's claim. Yes, the International Court of Justice has deemed Russia's counterclaim admissible, noting that Moscow's goal is to refute Ukraine's accusations and substantiate its own claim. Therefore, after the Kremlin's claim was accepted for consideration by the court, Russia has until December 7, 2027 to submit its arguments regarding its claim and its response to Ukraine. What do you think of our news? Let us know what we should change to become better. We will definitely take it into account. In the meantime, give this video a like to support what we do. And be sure to subscribe to our channel Ukraine Today so you don't miss our next episodes. See you!